The next presentation will be run by two speakers. A few words about two of them. Lotta Fabricius Kristiansen, she's from Sweden, National Competence Centre for advisory services. Swedish Agriculture University. She is a researcher. She's working on advisory services for ecosystems, especially for pollination. And in her advisory services, she's working on dissemination of knowledge for beekeeping. She runs different projects regarding building knowledge and competence centers for beekeeping in Sweden. Together with her husband, she's also running an Apinordica, that's a bee company. She used to be a coordinator of EIP Agri, that's a focus group, focusing on the health of beekeeping and sustainable beekeeping in the years 2019-2020. From 2019, she has been a member of COLOSS committee, and she's also a chairperson of the Bridging Research and Practice project, BRAP. Linde Morawetz, she's a researcher in the Austrian Agency for Food Safety. She's focusing on bee health and bee well-being. She's also looking at overwintering losses in bee. She's focusing on education of citizens, as a result of which she is facilitating the communication and the cooperation between the scientists and beekeepers. Advisory services for beekeepers is also part of her work, which covers everything from receiving phone calls from worried Austrian beekeepers to creating movies and leaflets about important things in beekeeping. Please enjoy the presentation. During the presentation, you can ask the questions to the speakers via the chat. And then at the end, we will pose the questions to the speakers. So, time for the presentation.
So, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Tak, słychać bardzo dobrze.
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting us to join this BEECOME 2021 conference. We are really privileged with you to have the possibility to present some of the results from the 2 BRAP surveys. That means the Bridging Research and Practice core project within COLOSS. And me and Linde Morawetz will guide you through this the next couple of minutes. So just to start with, a short presentation of COLOSS. So as was said before, I'm part of the executive committee of COLOSS, and COLOSS stands for Prevention of Honeybee Colony Losses. And it has been active for a little bit more than 10 years. It started as a network, and it then became an organization by itself. And it has its kind of overall goal, saying that the mission of COLOSS is to improve the well-being of honeybees at a global level. So here you can see the executive committee, and of course, I guess you recognize Anna Gaida here as well. We are 15 members of the committee, and then the organization have 3 core projects. And this means that we have those 3 topics are the things that is going as a kind of program throughout COLOSS, have special focus, and it's this colony losses monitoring that maybe many of you beekeepers have answered surveys about, to know more about the actual situation of colony losses within Europe and also globally, I would say. It has been increasing a lot. And then the bee book, writing about, for example, the different methods used within research to find out how the situation is within honeybee diseases, for example. And then BRAP, Bridging Research and Practice, And we also have task forces: Apitox, nutrition, sustainable bee breeding, smile hive beetle survivors, varroa control, velutina, and viruses. And you can find all of those core projects and task forces in the website. Let's see if I have, sorry, it's here. So to improve the health of honeybees internationally, COLOSS has said that it will act as a coordinating of honeybee monitoring and research, including the development of standard methods, the bee book I mentioned before, and disseminating knowledge and provide training related to improving the well-being of honeybees, as we do in BRAP group. And also COLOSS expertise. We will explain a little bit more very soon how the situation or what kind of members are there in COLOSS. But to work together at global level to improve the well-being of honeybees includes, of course, expertise within areas such as development of standard research methods, coordinating and conducting large-scale honeybee monitoring and research projects, disseminating knowledge and providing training related to the needs of bees, advocating for honeybees and their conservation, and a very important thing is networking and capacity building. So we have had 17 conferences. The latest one was in October this year, and more than 50 different workshops arranged within the core projects and the task forces. So it's sorry, I can see that it's changing the slides, so I'm just going back a bit because I need to see. Sorry. Let's see if we are back on track again. So here you have the website that I mentioned, where you can find all the core projects and the task forces, and there you have BRAP. So what is actually advisory services and communication all about? Because what we are trying to work with is actually to improve the connection, the exchange of knowledge between research and practice and research then, of course. So we have in the middle, in between research and practice, in a lot of cases, you do have advisors or people acting as an intermediate between those different lines. And to facilitate this, we know that sometimes there are problems with language. We don't understand each other because we do speak in a different way. Maybe we think we say the same things and it means the same to the other person, but actually it doesn't. So we need to work on how to communicate in a good way. So the goal of BRAP is actually to ensure that new results of science reaches the beekeepers. And we also want to really stress that it's very important that the practice, means the beekeepers, points of views and problems also reach back to science. So it's really a two-way communication that we need to work with. You can also illustrate it like this. And to facilitate the exchange of knowledge between the practice and science, we have the advisors like a mediator. And we also illustrate it like this. You can look at it as if you have two different kind of systems related to knowledge. You have the science part doing with the research, and then you have the local kind of community of practice, the local knowledge that is generated through practice. And these two really have to work together to be able to find solutions of how to cope with different problematic situations. And in between, we have the advisors, like a kind of a hub for these questions being circulating and have the information going back and forth between the different knowledge systems in this case. So I will hand over to Linde now. I think I just, wait, it went forward again. I will go back. Sorry for that. So a very short introduction. I think you had a long introduction to start with, so I don't have to say very much more, but I'm a beekeeper myself, was an advisor, and then work at the research at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. And then I will hand over to Linde Morawetz, my colleague and co-chair in BRAP. So as I mentioned before, we have conducted 2 different surveys. The first one was an online survey in 2019. It was actually addressing the COLOSS members to see how they, who they are and how they interact with beekeepers, just to get an overview of the situation. So it was actually, we have about more than 1,000 members of COLOSS, but not everyone answered this survey. We had 222 COLOSS members answering, and it was mainly from Europe. And as you can see, maybe here in the slide, we have partly from North America, about 15%, and then 14% from Asia, and from South America and Africa. So most of the answers came from Europe, and that is not so strange because, as I mentioned to start with, COLOSS started as a network financed by Cost Action and European money. So it was actually the focus of Europe. And then, since the question is really addressing honeybee welfare and the prevention of colony losses is a very global issue, it has added on members of COLOSS from the rest of the world as well. So, who are the COLOSS members? They are mainly researchers, not so surprising since it was actually the focus to have the network getting researchers together and discuss and develop scientific projects to how to deal with the colony losses. 74% of these define themselves mainly as researchers, but 21% also define themselves as mainly advisors. So you can say it's a combination, the members are a combination of researchers and advisors. But they all have an interest in advisory services.
We have Linde already online, so you can now pass the relay to her. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Świetnie.
Okay, thank you all together. As I do not have control over the slides, please help me with these. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly where Lotta is at the moment, but I see we have the slides with COLOSS member. So first of all, thank you. I apologize to be only now online, but we will proceed with the description of COLOSS members. So I think it's best to go to the next slide, as I'm sure Lotta explained that COLOSS members are mainly researchers. Yes, but the interesting thing is, although COLOSS members are mainly researchers, they have a high interest in advisory service, which is quite important for the question we are asking now. And it says that the COLOSS members said that around 60% have also advisory service in their work description. So that's a part of their work to work together with beekeepers on research topics. And when we now ask what proportion of the time beekeepers use in advisory service, it's about between 1 and 40%. Most of the researchers really dedicate in their work in working with beekeepers. So when we do some statistics, it's around 50, in mean 50% of their time. So please, the next slide. And COLOSS members have experience in beekeeping. Is also a very important point to work together with beekeepers to have an idea of what beekeepers are speaking of and have an idea of the praxis. And the COLOSS members who answered said that around 90% of them have experience in beekeeping, and most of them are even quite experienced beekeepers, as you see on the graph on the right side, that most of beekeepers have between 1 and 10 years of beekeeping, but then another 25% have over 11 to 20 years of beekeeping, and another 30% have even more years of beekeeping experience. So researchers really can speak about beekeeping with beekeepers on eye level. Please, next slide. So researchers are interested in having contact with beekeepers. Now our question was how this interaction is really happening. So what researchers do, very often I will speak about this in the next slide. They give talks, they give lectures, courses and workshops, and that's a very good possibility to come in contact with the beekeepers. And when you see, look at the first graph on the left side, we asked the researchers, do you encourage discussions? And here you see that most of the researchers really want to encourage discussions in such events. So we hear about 60% of the researchers, and most importantly, very, very few researchers say that do such things never. Very similar with times for question and answers, so the time that beekeepers can really answer questions to the researchers. Here we have even 80% of the researchers who said, yeah, I do this always. And again, no researchers, or nearly no researchers, who avoid question and answers. It's a little bit more complex with the interaction after such an event, with a survey to evaluate how good the event was for the beekeeper. I mean, that's a lot of additional efforts, and researchers say they do it sometimes, and only very, very few said they do such an interaction always. So there happens an interaction with beekeepers. And if you go to the next slide, please, we can speak about how researchers try to reach the beekeepers. So when you look at the graph on the right side, the different levels of or possibilities of interactions are listed here, ranked with their frequency of usage. And you see on the first place talks and lectures. So as I said before, researchers do a lot of talks and lectures, and 80% of the researchers say that's a tool they use. The second most important tool are beekeeping magazines. Around 60% of researchers use these channels, and after that come practical demonstration and courses, which about 50% of all researchers do. Then next would be other magazines, and only then social media appears, and websites, together with leaflets and newsletters, and very, very few researchers use blogs and vlogs. So you see, it's more in the real world, and your researchers use quite few researchers use social media. Next slide, please. Now the question is, what researchers do think works for beekeepers. Here we have another graph which shows a color gradient, while yellow means that the researcher thinks it's a very important tool for the beekeeper. This goes in grades, in blue grades up to violet, which means that researchers think that that's not an important channel for beekeepers. And you see the researchers think the most important thing is practical beekeeping, followed by fieldwork with beekeepers and websites. Only then beekeeping magazines come, and then social media. And I skipped now something in the middle. In the very end come national and international meetings. So the happenings where researchers do give talks. That means that researchers give many talks, but know or think that this isn't a very important channel for the beekeeper. But they also do practical demonstration, which they think are important for beekeepers. Interestingly, so the same with beekeeping magazines, they think it's important and it's really used. And the interesting thing is they think that internet and social media is important, but they don't use it very much. So when we go to the next slide, or the conclusion, better, there's a discrepancy between that researchers do a lot of talks, but you think beekeepers need information or use information in social media. But when we go to the next slide, there is the question in the room. That was the things researchers think beekeepers do, and it's now very important to ask the beekeepers themselves. So, what information do you really use? And for this, on the next slide, we see we did a second survey in the last 2 years, an online survey again conducted in the years 2020 and 2021, distributed in 23 languages, where the main focus was to understand the beekeepers' needs for dissemination. This was answered by over 1,100 beekeepers. As you see on the world map, we covered nearly the whole world. We covered over 90 countries. But the main information we got from Europe, here we have answers from over 9,000 beekeepers. And the data I show you now is only focused on European beekeepers, as this is a European meeting. So next slide, please. So when we speak about the European beekeepers, the gradients in the graph on the right sides are very similar. Yeah, so yellow is very important. Beekeepers said, I use this channel very always. Then comes often. The blue is sometimes, and the violet is never. This is again ranked. I only show 7 categories. We asked for 21 categories, but here you see the most important 7 categories, and you see the most important channel for beekeepers in Europe are beekeeping magazines and beekeeping books, followed by web pages, happenings or meetings in beekeeping clubs, scientific papers and books. That's very high ranked compared to what researchers think, YouTube and social media. So the most important sources for the beekeepers themselves, so defined by the beekeepers themselves, are beekeeping magazines, books, web pages and beekeeping club. When we now think about what researchers said, the thing which is quite similar is beekeeping magazines and books, and the internet. Next slide, please. What European beekeepers use additionally is social media. So 65% of all beekeepers said they use social media to get information. And so we should have a look what is the most important source. So here we did not ask for every source, but for the most important source. And you see around 25% of the beekeepers said Facebook is very important, and another 15% said YouTube is very important. Another important channel may be WhatsApp, but we really know that we can focus on 2 important channels, Facebook and YouTube, when researchers and beekeepers interact with each other. Please, next slide. So beekeepers, but beekeepers are not only receivers of the information, they also interact with this information and think which information is valuable for them. So we really asked, how do you check the credibility of the information you get? And very clearly we had two strategies which were used very strongly by beekeepers. First, I observe and experiment. About 50% of the beekeepers answered that way, and I read beekeeping literature, again 50%. Another quite important category was checking with the beekeeper network, so speaking with other beekeepers and checking the internet. A very important thing is that the last thing in the list, the last possibility in the list is I do not check other sources. It's over less than 10% of the beekeepers we asked, or which answered, said I do not check. So every beekeeper, most beekeepers really check and think about the information they get, and therefore we can say European beekeepers generate their own knowledge by observing and experimenting and by checking with other sources. Please, next slide. To sum up, interactions between researchers and beekeepers work quite well through beekeeping magazines. Beekeeping magazines reaches beekeepers and researchers do use them. The problem is this is one directional. The researcher writes the article, he or she has no idea if they use the correct language, if the beekeeper can think this idea is valuable, if the concept is practical or not. It's simply one directional. Giving talks reaches only a few beekeepers, and researchers also have not the possibility to go through the country and giving talks and talks and talks. There's also a problem with talks, but there the interaction is given. So here the beekeepers they have the possibility to ask questions, to speak with the researchers afterwards, maybe to engage in discussions. Bidirectional, so we can say more bidirectional effective communication is needed. So maybe social media could be a dissemination tool for this. And if you remember, we said we did the researcher survey in 2019. That means before the COVID-19 crisis. So it could be that researchers now use these tools more often than the 30% which was shown in that survey, but we really have to repeat such surveys regularly to see the changes in communication between beekeepers and researchers. And researchers can use help by beekeeping advisors because they can transport the message to beekeepers. They can multiply the message the researchers give in talks. So beekeeping advisors are disseminators, and most important, they are translators. They can take the scientific language and change it into beekeeping language. They can take the beekeeping language and change it into the language of the scientists. So next would be Lotta speaking more about extension and advisory service. So I hope the switch now works better. Can we switch to Lotta?
Tak, za chwilkę się na nią przełączymy.
Yes, in a moment we will switch to Lotte. Of course, there are some technical problems. Thanks to that, you know that we're real live.
Yeah, should I log off? Would it be more simple if I log off?
I guess wait a little. We will receive information from our technical support in a moment. How is connecting Lotte going?
Aha, czyli mamy już połączenie, tak?
Okay, we do have the connection already.
Good. Then I log off now.
So, hello again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you very well and clear.
Thank you. So, I couldn't hear Linde, but I do know the results. And as you understand, we have explained the kind of clashes between research and practice. In that sense, it's not so easy to connect and to kind of exchange knowledge in that sense. But that's why we're trying to kind of promote extension or advisory services, because generally we don't have these kind of systems developed very well in our different countries. We are used to having advisors or extension agents in other kind of agricultural sectors, but not so often within beekeeping. So that's why we are trying to put an effort into this. We really need to develop the advisory services. But the definition, as you can see here, of extension, or how to define extension and advisory services, is that you actually have this intervention is occurring, and that you have a kind of communicative strategy to induce the most effective way of doing this is through voluntary change, of course, that you don't feel a pressure to change things, but you actually feel that if I do these changes within my beekeeping, I can improve the health of the bees, or what it could be. And also then have the specific objectives in relation to the other communicative interventions. And it is usually deployed by an institution. So during the 20th century, the extension or advisory services has developed from doing to someone, I mean, telling someone what to do, to more being doing for someone, and then have this doing with being kind of where we are now in advisory service and extension. We're doing things together to change for a better bee health, for example, if we put that as a clear objective. So we can look at the advisory services in this way, that we also how to make knowledge available. We do need an organization for advisory services. We also have to look at the competence of the advisors, of course, and the methods used within advisory services to be able to create these changes or to more healthy honeybees. We stay with that goal so far. So if you look at it like this, as an advisor, you have to think about, if you're meeting a beekeeper, you have to think about who is he in this case. Of course, it could be she, but in this case, who is he? What does he see? What does he know? And what does he want to achieve? We have to be more interactive, kind of facilitating a process as an advisor. And the advisory service is basically about supporting another person to make well-balanced decisions and take actions. So it has to be very adaptable and changed regarding to the context and the personal situation, the local conditions. Some things are general, but many of these advices that you do have to give is really regional or local, adapted to the local conditions. So as an advisor, you also have to be aware of other driving forces that you have to be able to change. For example, regarding new insights, new possibilities or emerging needs, and also managing bottlenecks. You see some examples of these here. So the trend is actually going from kind of expertise in science, going towards a more expertise in pedagogics, because you have to be a good pedagogue to be able to inform, communicate with the practice. So from being more a researcher in that sense, you just create knowledge, you also have to be more outspoken, more interactive. And this is quite demanding if you're taking from the science or research perspective. That's why advisory services could be the facilitator of developing this trend of being more on the spot specific giving advice. So I don't know if you have heard about the front office and back office expressions. You use very common in other agricultural contexts, but if you look at as a front office, there you have the advisors interacting with the beekeepers, and kind of the back office where you have an institution or where you have the knowledge place for your what you are advising about and what facts you are basing them on. So it's both about competence and methods within the advisory services, but also about organization and incentives for having kind of knowledge fed into this. So really would like to thank all of BRAP members who has been participating in the development of the BRAP service, these two so far, and also, of course, all the local coordinators who has translated and distributed the beekeeper service so successfully. And of course, to all of you beekeepers who has answered our survey. And here you have our contact details if you want to get in contact with us. So please don't hesitate to do that. And we actually would like to be interactive with you. It's not so easy, but we have set up a Menti. So if you use your cell phone or on the computer, you log into menti.com and type the code as you see here, 66056737. There we have 7 questions that we would like you to answer. And we hopefully will give you some time to answer these questions, and then we will show the results live, hopefully from the audience now. So we will proceed to that. I think I will let this picture stay. So please enter the menti.com and type the code and answer some questions that we have put forward there for you. So Linde, she can see actually if you are answering any questions and if something is happening. So I can see Linde in the picture, but I can't hear her, and I don't know if you can hear me, Linde, because it's when we are double like this. But we will give you a few minutes to answer these questions. And from the studio, you please go in and answer the questions as well. We are really looking forward to your answers. I think things are happening because I can see Linde she's looking happy. Oh, great. So maybe we should let Linde, you can take over from now, and let's see if the results will. That's the first question I can see there. Which country are you from? So shall we hand over the microphone to Linde?
In a moment, we will have the opportunity to see the answers.
you hear me?
Czy mnie słychać?
Potrzebujemy jeszcze chwilę.
Yes, but we need a moment of patience. Please be patient for a moment, and in a moment we will see the results of the answers and the results of the poll. For those of you who are still typing the answers, Linde is showing how to do it correctly, although I don't think it's very, very difficult.
Zachęcamy Państwa do aktywności.
Please be active.
Warto wymieniać informacje.
It is definitely worth exchanging information.
Also has answered the Menti is from Poland because it's the largest in letters there. And then we have Belgium and France coming next. And then I guess it kind of even between Sweden and the United States, for example. And on the next question here, how old are you? We have most of the participants in the age span between 36 and 55 years of age, but also could see quite, that's the main group, of course, but then we have a bit younger and a bit older as well. And how many years have you been a beekeeper? So it's okay. Most of you who has answered the Menti have been not so for so many years, 1 to 2 years or 3 to 5 years. That's even. So between 1 and 5 years, you could say. And we also have some of the people answering here now are not beekeepers at all. Maybe not longer. Maybe have been before. That I don't know. But we also then have 6 to 10 years. And even some more than 20 years. So in which way did researchers interact with you until now? So we have the main result. Let's see if I can open so I see better what it says. Not at all is the first one. The second one I have trouble seeing actually because it's little bit hard on the screen. It's classes, I think, is it? The most of you have had some interaction there. Oh, thank you. Giving talks, it says. Yes. As we saw also in the survey before, that was researchers do a lot. They give talks or presentations. And then through social media is quite high as well. So yeah, so we can see that's the main contacts or interaction between the researchers and you. Can go to the next maybe. So here are some statements. How interested are you in providing researchers with information? Like, for example, in surveys. So you had about 3.7, a little bit more than, it's a bit more than average. And then we have trying certain defined protocols in your beekeeping. Also a little bit more than average, kind of very interested way, a little bit more than. You can also see in the backline where you have the distribution of the answers. So I would say kind of, they're quite interested anyway to work with defined protocols. To work with the researchers. Get some training to be a field trial expert. Also kind of the middle, but we do have a tendency, a little bit higher amount of answers being very interested in that. And also develop questions and protocols together with researchers. So we are a little bit more than average wanted to be, or being interested in dealing with these interactions with the researchers. That's great, I think, because that's what we actually need. Because if you want to link practice and research in a good way, of course, we need to, or the researchers need to perform field trials, and that to make it more, have more applied research being done. It needs to be working together with beekeepers. So to do that, we also, of course, need to encourage these kind of collaborations. So let's see. Here, do you know any researchers with whom you would like to interact? Yes and no. Most of you had actually answered no here. That's also interesting to see. But quite many of you do have contact, or at least know researchers that you could contact if you like. So in which way did you contact researchers yourself? So we have in the top, I don't contact them. But mainly here, I talk to them on meetings and I write emails. So not so common to use social media for contact or phoning them, or then you have a few of you who don't know how to contact them. So you can see in meetings where presentations or talks are given, you can also talk to them, of course. So I guess this is what it shows. And this was the last slide, I think. So now we have gone through the questions that we have in the survey.
Yes, this is true. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for the presentation and presenting the results of the survey and the research.